Hi everyone, hope you can hear me. Please say yes in the comments if you can hear me well. If there is any technical glitch, we'll be monitoring the comments as well to see that. So welcome to GCC Insider Convergence. We are going to talk on a couple of themes today. I know it's Saturday, so it's not going to be too long. We are going to have it for roughly 85 to 90 minutes. Four key themes, starting with the new location coordinates and the emerging industries. So, which are the new cities where the future lies for 2030? And which are the new industries which have started investing into GCCs very recently, and we see them growing up till 2030. So, that's the theme for our first session. The second one is about the Mega GCC. So, as we know, there are a lot of BFSI and other GCCs which are there for 30 years, having more than 25,000 people across different cities of India. Now they need to reinvent themselves. They are working a lot on transforming their processes, the way they work, and that's the need of the hour. So they are working on that part. We'll deep dive into that along with a couple of financial services experts. The third panel would be on the capability gap. So what an employer want, what a GCC want versus what is available in the market. So when we say the market, it's us. So what do we bring to the table versus what's there, what's needed by the company. So how do we match those gaps? So first identifying those gaps, having some practical insights, the use cases, the real life experiences, and then taking away a lot of valuable lessons from there, that where do we invest our time to make our career sustainable and grow better. So that's the third one. The fourth one is about the career pivot linked to the third one again, where we deep dive into capability building, more of upskilling. So there are thousands of courses now, online, offline. Everybody is talking about AI. What are those courses which make sense out of all of this? So how to filter it, how to make it more useful for us, and what could be the alternate career. So it's not necessary that we had been working in certain domains and it has to be there 5 years later as well. There are certain domains which will cease to exist in 5 years, 7 years time from now. So that's again a very honest discussion, deep dive on the career pivot. So our first session, I'll start. I'm the moderator for the first session on the location coordinates and emerging industries, and then we have three more colleagues moderating other three sessions coming forward. We do have guests in the first session. Our first guest here on the stage is Mr. Sandeep Podar, who leads Kimberly Clark GCC, and it's in Pune. I don't want to speak on his behalf. I'll give him a mic to speak for a minute about what he has done, what he's doing. So he's our first guest for this session. It's sharing his own experience. The second person which will be on stage is Manvi Singh. So she is representing energy industry. She's working with Amaraja. I'm adding her to this screen as well. So these two are our panelists. We'll have a couple of more guests joining soon. So over to you, Sandeep, if you want to start with your intro, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you, Sami, and thank you everybody for joining on a Saturday afternoon. I know we had choices to do something else, but I think you did kind of come over. Thanks for joining. It's quite interesting that we are at a time, Sami, as you mentioned, that GCCs are pivoting and they're trying to kind of reinvent. And I have seen it myself. I've spent now 25 years in various capacities around all continents, setting up GCCs for Fortune 500 companies. And currently, I am setting up the GCC for Kimberly Clark, based in Pune. We have just started, and quite interesting to see the pivoting where we are taking more ownership. And I'm happy to talk about more, Sami, once you probably come back on the question. But thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Sandeep. Glad to have you here. Manvi, can you hear us? Somehow we can't hear you or see you. I can see you in the room, but somehow the video feed is not on. Let us know when you can hear us. Yeah. So Sandeep, we'll quickly jump into the discussion, which is the core purpose of being here. I think everybody in this industry at least knows you very well. you don't need an intro. So we just wanted to have some more time to start with. But so we are running roughly 10 minutes late, and it's purposefully, all delayed because I see people joining on Saturday. They're having some technical glitches. So we expect everybody to join in, not missing the key factors when we discuss. The first question, which is very easy, I would say, you represent a very dynamic industry, right, which is ever evolving. That's CPG and FMCG. I mean, that's not very predictable. It's driven by so much of internal factors, external factors, all of this happening, right? So having a GCC for that kind of industry in India at the scale, and you are the one as an architect to build it, right? Now you manage cost and efficiency centers, both you have done throughout your career. From your experience, what is one capability your GCC owns, specifically from your current GCC perspective, or you have been doing a lot of other industries as well in past, wherever you want to pick that example from. So you can choose one particular capability which today the GCC owns. When we looked back 10, 15 years back, I started somewhere 20 years back. I'm sure you did almost similar time or even earlier. It used to be a very different world comparing to today's. Where do you see that one capability which is today you are delivering successfully? Nobody could think of it earlier. They could not even try it. We had considered very different world, a third world country, for only doing certain jobs, not these kind of capabilities. Do you want to share any practical examples on those?
Well, I think you kind of summed up very well in terms of the evolution. And over the last 2 decades, starting off with Texas Instrument and JECS, and where we are today, having more than 1,800 GCCs across the length and breadth of Indian cities and sectors. And as we speak, we have more GCC opening up. It's opening up faster than a new Netflix series is launched, more than one per week last year, and it continues to grow. Even in Pune, I was reading, we have absorbed more than 9.5 million square foot of commercial real estate, largely towards the GCC. So the expansion of GCC is quite dynamic. And if I look back 10, 15 years ago, look, I think the trust was always there, even earlier. And the trust was more on the execution side. So we were expected to really have a very well-defined work, execute. There were SLAs and KPIs, and that was the overall, opportunity to probably look at the end-to-end ownership. So I would probably say that earlier the headquarters would not give you the overall trust to have the end-to-end ownership. And now I see the shift happening where GCCs are able to really take the end-to-end ownership of the business outcomes, which means that we are able to be on the decision table, look into the problems, and not only solve it, but give ideas, do a little bit of what I call as trade-offs, set up the operating models, the location strategy. Of course, you mentioned about speed and cost and risk. But I think when you really bring all of this together, that means that we are able to really, influence the decision and look at the business outcomes. It's not as much as about that the capability did not exist earlier. Capability did exist, but I think, we had demonstrated value and purpose. And I think that's where it has all come into place. So for me, one big one, of course, there are many, but one big one is having the end-to-end ownership of the business outcomes. And this happened not overnight, right? They took a little while when we started to kind of say, not only what we can execute, but say what problems can we solve for you. So that's where I think GCCs have become truly magical and truly strategic.
Thanks, Sandeep. So I think next one is very much, again, linked to this. It's similar question, but we have seen this evolution happening, right? Probably we have not realized on daily basis, but definitely when you look back and you see the world then, GCC world then versus GCC world now everybody's talking about it. Earlier, yes, we had different names. We used to call it shared services or back office or GPSs or GCCs or GIC. I mean, there were 100 names, but things were almost same where we are trusted to do certain works, even those days. We are trusted to do certain work today. The underlying work has shifted a lot. And that's the game. That's why world is now talking about the GCC ecosystem of India. The government is very bullish on investing into all these incentives and all those things. So just to understand a little more on the context side of this, how do we see these product roadmaps, the architecture decisions? Where have you seen this decision-making authority shifting? Because I personally tell you, when I talk about 20 years back, we are considered as order taker. In most of the cases, we didn't have a seat on the table when the decisions were made. When we're talking about the groups planning for, be it for investment, be it for the product launch, be it for any software development, we used to just take orders and execute, and then that was our achievements which were shown. Today we see GCCs having a seat on the table, and that's not only where we're stopping, rather we are part of that planning. We drive all of these growth vehicles. I can see a lot of product launches happening from GCC, a lot of CXOs sitting in the GCCs. Where do we see this shift of decision making authority, and are we good now where we say, the future is bright, now we are a partner in the growth for our organizations, or we still have to do a lot?
Look, I think it's very different for different industry and different GCC depending on the maturity. You talked about mega GCCs in the beginning, right? And they have been there for 20 years, and there are some who have set up the shops in the last 10 years. I mean, look at mine. We just kind of started last year. So I think depending on the maturity and the evolution, I think every GCC would have its own journey. But then if I probably look at the overall, content and the context that we have, there are new GCCs which are set up with a very clear mandate. And old GCCs or mega GCCs or GCCs which have been there for 10, 15 years, they have kind of moved into the maturity curve. I don't see anybody now talking about SLAs and KPIs, and everybody says that what can you add as a value? What business outcomes can you influence? You're also talking about small little, nano GCCs. Nano GCCs are set up to really kind of do a clinical research or design a particular product or design a data analytics. And then I think they're able to grow there. So I think it's all about looking at the shift in terms of direction. And when I look at the overall direction, I find that irrespective of the tenure and the maturity, we are able to really influence the decision. Probably say that we typically are taking the decisions on our own, but at least we're able to influence the decision. And that's a shift that I see more often. For example, what should be the location strategy in India? Where should we really go and hire a particular talent? What should be the, there are a lot of government incentives, and typically I see that GCCs are spoiled for choices in terms of when they are setting up a new shop, because the incentives are very, very attractive. Of course, it takes time. Then again, there are challenges about the quality and the standard of living in each of the cities. And then if you have an Indian presence on some of the products, you want to kind of gain a market share and make sure that you launch your GCCs very close to where your overall strategy is. So I would suggest that this whole influence has happened in terms of the shift, and we are able to choose which decisions to take in terms of how to look at transformation initiatives. It's not a mandate as such, what I'm saying, but this is a credibility that is built over time with deep proximity to the global stakeholders. There's so many visits that we do both into the centers and outside of the centers, being very close to the work that has been done, understand the business challenges. So I think that's where I think the influence is the key for me in terms of how I see there.
Thanks, Sandeep. So these are all the positive developments we have seen over the decades, where we have placed ourselves from execution engine to more of a strategic partner. I know there's a long way to go. Not every GCC is placed at the same level. Everybody is at the journey. Somebody has just started. Someone have already reached to the maturity curve. But I think the future looks good with this. Now we come to the challenges in getting to the next level of this partnership. Where do you see, from your industry perspective, whatever industry you have seen personally, what are the capabilities today in India which are still hardest to build or hire from inside GCCs today? I'm sure we are going to talk this couple of times today with all the panelists in different sessions, but I really want to hear your experience, on the capabilities which are really difficult.
Look, I think it's not very unique just to GCCs. It's there across the globe. The business models are getting disrupted. The companies are probably struggling. New emerging technologies are coming, which means that every organization has to repurpose, including GCCs. And I think that's where the shift is happening. I mean, we all talk about, we've probably, have STEM graduates produced every year, which is 1.7 million, 1.8 million per year, which is bigger than the population of a small country. But then how many are ready? How many of them can really solve complex problems? I think it's not as much as about the availability of talent, availability of the capability, but it is about the expectations from GCCs to play a very pivotal role and a different role than 10, 15 years ago. And dealing with ambiguity, dealing with complexity, I think that takes a lot of experience. I sometimes say this, that you depending on where your headquarters is, let's say it is in US, in the morning you need to speak the language of, if you're in Pune, a misal pav and a vada pav, and the evening you wake up to New York and you talk about the language of a dark black coffee and a Big Mac burger. So the ability to kind of shift cultures, shift the nuances, shift the challenges, that takes a lot of experience and exposure. Not only domestic exposure to manage the talent, but convey the story back to the global headquarters, which is in a very different culture and a language. I think that's I think a challenge and a gap that I see in terms of where GCCs are expected to do. Of course, in terms of very specific to domain, we need talent which is looking at very, very important business storytelling capabilities, or looking at senior technical roles, solution architects, data analytics, product design. I mean, these are the areas which are challenging, yet talent is not available in plenty today in terms of building up these GCCs. And that's where I think if I look at the overall capability gap, there's a huge capability gap. But I see that GCCs are investing in this, and they are trying to kind of upskill. They are deliberately building these capabilities and capacities instead of going to the market, because in the market also the availability is very less. So it is a natural choice to upskill and then upgrade, and that's where I think GCCs are trying to kind of manage this gap.
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. I think that's the only bottleneck I would see, causing any breaks. It will be putting brakes on our journey, which we are doing now, because we certainly have to find solutions for these capabilities. Where, I mean, when it was about the bulk, we were trusted to do something basis SOP. It was much easier for us to develop, in millions, not really even in thousands. We had these production houses, all the universities, all the training companies, all these BPOs, ITS. So the supply was in bulk. The moment we go to the niche now, I think that's probably one area where GCCs have to be very careful to see what is needed by the market versus, what we are producing. Now, one question on one of our team on the location. I know it could be personal for many, but I'll be honest. I just want to hear your views. Now, we see a lot of debates happening about Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai. Everybody has their own GCC policy. Everybody has their own teams trying to bring more businesses to the economy. They all have their targets to make India a larger economy. They are more working like corporate, all of these states as well. But at the same time, somewhere we feel like all these cities, and there's no offense to any of the Pune or Bangalore, we feel choked. We feel beyond certain limit. The clusters where you have most of the offices, you can't move at all in the peak hours. Your vehicle stays at the same signal for 30 minutes, 25 minutes. You don't even move your legs from the brake pedal. So I think this is where the question comes: can we explore tier 2, tier 3 city? I know there had been a lot of discussion that yes, this tier 2 is growing, this tier 3 is growing. I don't want to name, but there are a lot of them. But of course, it comes with a lot of challenges as well. It's not as easy as building a business in Pune versus building a business in any of the Coimbatore or Vadodara or Jaipur. There's a lot of difference. And then same thing comes for Bangalore. What's your view on this? Do you think in next 5 years we have to go to tier 2, tier 3? If answer is yes, how do we make it happen?
Again, my context here is that if I look at the last 20-25 years, and if there's a crystal ball, it's not just GCCs. I think every organization, every industry is trying to kind of repurpose and look at the location strategy. Even in terms of current geopolitical tensions, I mean, I have a call next week to talk about with my leadership team on the BCP strategy. Because of the geopolitical tensions which are emerging in very different regions and very different contexts. So I think location strategy becomes very important in that context. And within India as well, you see every company is trying to kind of compete with each other because there are incentives, there are advantages of talent, there is a close proximity. I mean, if I look at our company, we have a plant in Pune, and we have a Indian headquarters in Mumbai. So it was quite a natural choice to just kind of purpose our GCC where we have a 3-in-a-line model where we can really kind of give a complete experience to everyone. I think it all depends on the overall industry, location, and overall strategy. But if I have to just think about GCCs in particular, it's not just GCCs. I mean, Bangalore has outspaced itself. And it is not just traffic. There are many different elements. Why did we really kind of move a lot of roles from Europe and West and high cost locations to India? Because the talent was cheap, and I think there was a cost arbitrage. We may hate to say this, but still that's the first discussion on the table, that when we move into GCC's GBS, cost is an advantage. And then the second advantage is talent, availability of talent in bulk, in skill. Of course, there are some challenges on the niche skills. Now, if I look at cost and talent, and I think others, of course, we can talk about the stickiness and attrition and the availability of real estate and the quality of living and weather and all this lovely stuff. But if I just look at these two pillars, right, cost and talent, still mega GCCs or big GCCs, they already have presence. They're not going to kind of move their shops into a new city just because the cost and the talent is available. I think what I am saying is that Tier 1, Tier 2, if I may call, and Tier 3, Tier 4, or Tier 2, Tier 3, they will coexist. We will probably not look at either or, but we will look at both coexisting. And that will decide in terms of what work goes where, right? Sometimes I think we want to look at an answer in binaries, and that's a little difficult and challenging. See, today, large cities and big cities do provide a lot of impetus. They're able to have very complex problem solving capabilities. They're able to do high complex work. There are availability of talent. I mean, it's quite easy to look at data analytics. You want 400 people, you get it there in Bangalore. Can you get in a Tier 2 city? I mean, I'm just kind of throwing up a number. Can you get in a city like Jaipur or Coimbatore or Kochi or whatever, right? So I think the Tier 2 cities will continue to grow. They will coexist. Also, the other challenge I see in terms of Tier 2, Tier 3 cities is the availability of leadership. Most of the current, if I look at the transition of the leaders, today I'm being told that we have more than 3,000 to 5,000 CXOs operating out of GCCs in India for global fortune companies. Now, how many of them are based in Tier 2, Tier 3? They're largely, based on Tier 2, whatever cities you were calling about. So I think the availability of the leadership talent in the Tier 2 cities will also allow for a little bit of transition from Tier 1 to Tier 2, and that's not happening very consistently. So that's another constraint in terms of the growth of the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, to look at cost, look at talent, but also have the leadership index being slightly more higher. So my key takeaway is that we will never have a hub and a spoke model. Did you get my point? We'll never have a hub or a spoke model. We will have hub and spoke model. Both will coexist.
Yeah, that's very important, I think, and that's the game which most of the people don't understand. They still keep fighting whether it's this or that. It's always this and that. So every single GCC who want to build the talent, who want to grow a scale, their centers, they don't have a choice, but they have to be multi-city. They have to select different cities for different type of work, different type of skill sets, different priorities in the cost versus scale, a lot of these things. So that's very good takeaway. So last question, Sandeep. I know you joined us from middle of a conference. Thank you so much for that. But a quick one, and just one line answer here. If you were starting your career today instead of these many years back. I don't want to quote your age here by telling exact numbers. So, what is one industry GCCs which is your preference? You have worked in 4 or 5 already. Which one is your preference if you have a reset button and you start as a new GCC comer today and you're given 3 options? Which one you'll go for?
Are you talking about a capability or industry?
Which industries capability center? So because we also talked about which GCCs industries are growing now. So if this question was asked 30 years back, people have just one answer is banking or the insurance, because then you had likes of Amex, likes of Bank of America, all of them. Today, what's that industry?
See, I think it's more about again, I'm still. We all rediscover ourselves regularly. I think otherwise, if there's no self-awareness, there's no curiosity, there's no learning. I think we become docile, and in this age of disruption, that's a key requirement. I do that every often. I would probably say that if I was probably younger, I wouldn't really, focus as much on a particular industry. I think it's more about what I'm able to do with my role, what is the purpose, and how can I make a difference. And sometimes I think some of the skills and competencies that we acquire can only give you a foot in the door in the opportunity in an industry. But what you do with the skill and that opportunity is something which is very important. So if I were to choose, I will choose how do I probably join an industry or a company which gives me a purpose to learn and contribute my skills and competencies.
Thanks. Sorry, but one more. So which is one role you don't see 5 years from now? It won't exist anymore. One role which is there in GCC today.
Oh my God, that's a tough one. But look, I believe that we typically look into reconciliation and reconciliation between system A and system B. I think the whole function of reconciliation will typically go away. We don't need to kind of look at reconciliation between whatever we do, right? So I know that means a lot of roles will repurpose, a lot of roles will change, but I see that happening inevitably. I may be wrong, but I may be wrong only in terms of how long does it take. It's not about whether it will happen or not. It is more about when will it happen.
Thanks, Sandeep. Thank you so much for your time. I'll not take you anymore for this. I know you are leaving you are already missing the conference. You are already out from your home. Please enjoy your conference. Thank you so much for being here. I think people have loved it. I can see the comments. Everybody is like, there are hundreds of comments now in the comment box, and they're all positive. People are very motivated, I would say, even on Saturday morning. I didn't expect these many people to at least type. I thought of keeping it like a broadcast, more like a one way, but I can see a lot of engagements happening. So thank you so much for making it, Sandeep. We'll keep connecting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
So we'll start the next session in another 2 minutes. Please stay tuned. We'll start the next session in 2 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Now, the second session, right? So we go back about 15 years where, the most finance work in GCC was primarily focused on transaction processing, reconciliation, and reporting, right? Fast forward to today, if we really look at many GCCs, right, are running global FP&A, controllership, advanced analytics, leading, transformation programs, and even influencing enterprise strategy. So the big question is, how did the finance GCC evolve from back office operations to strategic finance partners? To explore this journey, I'm delighted to be joined by two experienced finance leaders who have witnessed this transformation firsthand. I would like to welcome Nitin. Nitin brings over 2 decades of experience across finance transformation, consulting, and global capability centers. At Barclays, he plays a key role in driving strategic finance initiatives and advancing the evolution of GCCs. And joining with him is Atul Chanani. Atul is a seasoned financial services leader with over 2 decades of experience across global banking and finance operations. At Citi, he has held several leadership roles and brings deep expertise in finance transformation and global capability centers. So let's start with the big picture. Atul, maybe the first question for you. When you look back over the last decade, right, what would you say has been the single biggest shift in the role of finance GCCs?
Great.
Atul?
Thank you, Roshan. I hope you can hear me well.
Yep.
Right. Great. Good to join all of you. Thank you for inviting me. Hi, Nathan.
Hello.
As you rightly said, Roshan, we have seen a huge change in the whole evolution of the finance GCC in the last 15 years. It's not been it's not happened overnight. As I was hearing in the previous discussion as well. We started with the concept of cost optimization, the leverage of cost benefit. I started with transactions, data entry, and have reached where we are. Now, I think if you think of the shift, the primary shift in my mind is the shift that we have seen in the maturity of the talent and the heavy reliance that the organizations have on the leadership in India. It's very difficult to say which comes first. It's almost like a chicken and egg, where the organizations start relying on the teams in India versus whether you have the right capabilities that already exist for you to be able to do the same or not. But we have done we have got the right talent in the initial years, in the first 8 9 years, where people have done things which might have felt like we are doing something which we could have if you get chartered accountants and MBAs from top tier colleges, they would come and say, are we supposed to do this? How do we evolve? How do we take our career further? Can this industry provide us the capabilities or can this industry utilize our skill skills, or do we really need to move to the front office? uh, that shift has started happening in the last 6 years, where you're now very much involved in decision making. The senior leadership has grown within the ecosystem in the last 15, 16, 17 years now, and they are very well placed to play that strategic decision making role. One more thing which I'll add is how the shift is also happening, where earlier, for you to grow in the organization, for you to get to that level of senior VPs, directors, you really need to. The concept was you need to have a very very large team to be able to grow, and that shift is also happening, where you have the CFO role, product CFO roles, which is not uncommon anymore, where we have seen a lot of those roles moving to India, which gives an opportunity for people to take on those global mandates instead of just a localized team.
Got it. Thank you, Atul. Nitin, do you also see the same shift in your organization?
Yeah, Roshan, I think very similar. I would say what Atul mentioned, completely aligned with the financial services industry part of thing. The only thing I would just add is another reason why we are able to do it is because now the GCCs are becoming at the integration of global data flow, right? We see more end to end than our front office today from a data perspective, right? And that allows us to do certain roles that Atul mentioned on the engineering side, on the product side, etc. Because we have the insights of how the customer behavior and the product profitability and different regions are moving. So that's the only added advantage I see. I mean, just to as a supporting argument, I mean, to what Atul mentioned.
Yeah, makes sense, Nitin. I mean, you're right, because today, if we look at many global companies, right, they really rely on the GCCs just not for reporting, but also for enterprise decision support. So you are right on that part. So is it, I mean, can you share an example where your GCC has actually played a critical role in shaping a major financial or strategic decision for a global,
Yeah.
for the global organization? Nitin?
Yeah, sure. I can. I mean, and even from my consulting experience, we helped one of the largest FMCG company who were consolidating and setting up their FP&A COE in India as a GCC. Now that's a big one from a finance perspective. It's like moving up the value chain. So the whole function was getting consolidated in terms of people, process, and technology. So they were getting onto cloud. So they were transforming their whole function from that perspective. They were, hiring people who are FP&A experts, and third, they are creating processes where the role of the GCC and the role of the front office countries, I mean, are involved. And the idea was that within 3 to 4 years they should transition everything from all the countries across the world, right? So that's one example, and through that, the deliverables of the FP&A team was not only to give them annual budgets and planning versions and reports. It was also to help the product managers, the regional teams, to take calls. So all the data availability became central, and the whole decision making became faster. So that's one example from a non financial services kind of a GCC perspective, where I was directly involved in implementing it. From a financial services perspective, again, I would take analytics as the center of this thing, because we are talking about decision making. More and more, I see that the finance teams are playing part in consolidating the data layers that is required, because we all do report from a financial perspective to the share market. We do report management reporting to the management for decision making, and we also report the most important one to the regulators from their reporting perspective. So we are the biggest consumer of data from a outside in perspective, right? So more and more finance teams are taking roles in consolidating the data layers and owning the data layers, which used to be a very, very tech function. But right now, either it is owned jointly by the teams, or in many cases, owned by the finance team, and infrastructure is owned by the technology team. So these are two examples that I see which are relevant to this. I don't know, Atul, anything that you see similar or different in this case?
No, completely agree with you, Nitin. You've touched on exactly the points that I would have otherwise mentioned. But another, while the data and the technology piece has been, the center of all, global projects are led by the teams here now. Even when we think of any major reorgs, right? So anything we have seen so many large organizations across the globe are going through different type of reorgs right now. Could be because of different reasons, including AI. I have seen none of these conversations happen without the leadership team in India sitting in the room, right? So that was not the case even 5 years back, I would say. But that shift has suddenly started happening. It's a combination of, because of the size of team, percentage of the global team that sits in India. So we have proportionately very high numbers, and also the involvement that the teams have in the work. Because you can't take a decision in isolation and expect it to be successful. So that's something which has been very, very evident in the last few years.
Rightly said, Nitin and Atul. I think, yeah, you're right, because what has changed basically is, the GCCs are able to influence the decision. It's because of data, analytics, capability, technology, and leadership trust. As rightly put it across, right? So, that's really well articulated. Thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to the next question, right? We see mega GCCs being set up in India, and India as being the hub for the GCCs now, right? So, Atul, from a finance leadership perspective, right, what advantages does that scale bring, where it is more than 30,000 plus, professionals globally employed, right, from a mega GCC standpoint? And what governance and coordination challenges do you see which comes in managing the finance at that scale?
So I'll answer it in two parts. Like, one, assuming where we are now, right? So if we ignore the challenges that we have faced to reach this journey, if we think of what we have created now, as an ecosystem, the volume that we have created, the talent that we have created, I think the advantage that the global teams see now is there is so much opportunity for us to cross leverage the talent. You will see a lot of movements that happen within the GCCs where a finance person is going and doing something very good in risk, and if you have some new center which is created for audit, there is no reason why you can't have one leader moving from a risk organization to an internal audit organization and do a great job there, because this person understands the organization in and out. This person understands how compliance works, and this person will be the best fit there. Instead of trying to think of how do I get an auditor to join us and understand the organization culture. So when I talk to my global leadership, whenever we are thinking of doing something new, they're very keen to see how do we leverage the talent, and they're very open to cross-functional kind of movement. So that's an advantage because of the ecosystem. But if I think of the challenges that you mentioned, so one of the things that we have, all of us, whether in the initial days especially, is attracting and retaining the top talent, right? Because anybody who is really good would, after a few years, start thinking, what do we do next, right? How do I get the exposure that I want to look for? Do I have to move to an Indian setup to get that exposure? Or do I have to move to New York or London or somewhere to get the exposure of the front office? And that moment happened. We were the top supplier for global talent from India, right? So we've done that in Citi, and I'm sure we've done that in all large organizations. But that was the only career path that the top talent could see to grow and learn for their capabilities. That shift is again happening as well, right? So like I was talking earlier, we have seen the quality of the roles, we have seen the seniority of the roles increase gradually, and where we are, I think that's a challenge that we are now overcoming. There is no reason why you can't do a CFO role sitting here, and that's something which is becoming much easier. I hope I have answered the full question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I'm assuming you have seen something similar in your area as well.
Yeah, very, very similar. The only thing I would add, which is very practical, sometimes less spoken, the disadvantage side. Advantages are absolutely clear. And that's the way to go. It slows us down because we are in a metric structure, right? Sometimes if we don't give enough importance to how we are creating layers within the organization from a decision-making perspective, while data is coming faster, sometimes these layers, they slow the decisions down. So we have to continuously look at the governance structure to see is it really supporting the business objectives and the growth objectives that we are following, right? So that's a trap and a pit that we need to avoid. So regular sessions, candid session in the leadership, I think they bring some of these things out. So that's the only thing I would add. Otherwise, absolutely similar experience what Atul mentioned.
Got it. That's a great insight on evolution of the GCCs. Let's maybe let's now shift the focus or the conversation into the technology and automation in finance, because the technology is actually reshaping the finance function everywhere, right? So Nitin, in your GCC, right, which finance process have you actually seen the most meaningful transformation through automation or AI, or and most importantly, also where do humans still are indispensable? So want to answer that question as well.
Humans are indispensable. They will remain indispensable. And I will touch upon why I'm saying what I'm saying. But the importance of technology is paramount, right? And that's the reason I moved from consulting to GCC, is because even in consulting, technology sits separate than the functional consulting. So I was part of functional consulting, whereas I mean you can't keep it separate anymore, right? That's the idea. And then in GCCs, you can have exposure to both. So that's a very important aspect for anybody who is building their career now, who are in the leadership, who call themselves. We used to call ourselves, oh, I am a chartered accountant, I am a CPA, I am a non-technical person, so I will not comment on technical stuff, right? Doesn't work anymore. As a CFO, as a consulting partner, as a process owner, you can't say that. You have to have an understanding of technology. So that's number one. Second is answering your specific question: which areas have seen maximum impact of that technology? So the first one where we have seen maximum impact across is financial reporting. That's the biggest function of finance, right? So where maximum number of people are, right? And the timelines are already fixed, and accuracy levels are expectations are 100%, not 99.9%, 100%, right? So so that is one area where a lot of automation was done. In the previous session, I think Sandeep was mentioning about reconciliation, etc. It's a big team in every GCC, right? Which is part of the financial reporting. So intercompany reconciliation and the GL reconciliation and all of that. So that's where we have seen quite a lot. The second area which is taking shape is the FP&A function, where you not only have to look in the past. Financial reporting is looking in the past, which is relatively easier. This is more looking into the future, right? So where you're looking at the rolling forecast, the long range plan, and things like that. So where you can really use the machine learning aspect of it, the AI aspect of it, and because you need a lot of data points from multiple sources, I mean, to come to a conclusion, right? And that's another area where it is taking shape. I'm not commenting on the accounts payable aspect of it, because many of the large mega GCCs in financial services, they don't consider accounts payable as a core finance activity. I mean, in many cases, it has moved to procurement function, right? So, but there is a lot of automation in that area, but that's why I'm not mentioning in my top two. Otherwise, that's another area where there is a lot of automation that is happening in accounts payable area.
Rightly said, Nitin. Even the recent trends that we are seeing, where AI deployment in the finance streams actually is helping out in either variance analysis or the forecasting or anomaly detection. So I mean, you're right. So on that part, AI has become part of the finance function, the way we work, right? So both have to coexist, right? Now moving on to the next question, right? Now this is a little on the global CFO part. Like what we see is more of India is producing incredible finance talents, but many of the global CFOs are still sitting outside of GCCs, right? So, Atul would want your critique on this as to what needs to change for finance leaders from GCCs to become future global CFOs or enterprise leaders.
Yeah, it's as we speak, it's happening, Roshan. But it's happening very slow. I agree with you. It's happening very slow, and there are 2-3 reasons to that, and that's where we have to focus as well. One, we've lot of GCCs that we see are from the western part of the world, right? So from the Americas and from Europe. especially in the banking sector, as I think about my organization as well. So as you think of those global CFO roles, these are really senior roles, and you need the right talent for that. We used to struggle with that time zone difference as well, right? So do you really have somebody who is a CFO candidate who wants to work till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the night? Answer was generally no, right? I would rather move to New York if I want to do that. Was the answer. That mindset is shifting on both sides. It is shifting here because I'm showing that flexibility, and it is also shifting on the other side where the world is becoming more flexible, especially in this post-COVID world, where it is now easy for you to play some of those roles, at least overcome the operational part of it. The talent was never a problem, right? So as the operational challenges are being overcome, we are shifting that. We are seeing that shift, and a lot of these people have grown in the ecosystem, so they understand the products very well. They understand the technicalities very well. One thing that Nitin was also mentioning in the previous question, the adoption of technology is going to be very important, and we are very right placed to do that because we have access, the kind of visibility that we have to data and the systems nobody else has across the globe because of everybody sitting together here. That leverage of ecosystem is very important. As you do that, and you keep upskilling yourself in terms of your product understanding, you'll be there. And
Got it.
something that we by nature shied from doing. Raise your hand. Right? So if there is some opportunity that comes up, we say, okay, I would like to do this, and that we don't do that as comparatively shy generation. Yeah.
Absolutely, you're right. So I mean, it's also, if we have to sum that up for the audience, it's more about if you have to be there, we need to have exposure to the business decisions, and also from ownership of the strategy that is there, and the technological adoption primarily. So that is what will actually make us global CFOs, where or enterprise leader primarily. Now, moving on to the next one, right? Let's look at it more from a strategic perspective, right? See, traditionally, a financial strategy was, sitting at global headquarters, right? But GCCs are actually increasingly participating in global planning cycles and investment decisions. So, I would want to know from both of you as to, how much ownership do finance GCCs truly have today in shaping the enterprise strategy, and where do you see this evolving? Atul?
Maybe I'll
Maybe.
start and
I mean, either way.
Nitin, please go ahead.
Atul can add. So that's a very important aspect. I'll give you a little bit of practical view around it, right? So what's the aspiration? Yes, we want to be involved in the strategic finance and strategy decision, etc. Are we involved? Absolutely, yes. I don't think there is any strategy being made where the views of the GCC leaders have not been asked. But are we the creator of that strategy? Are we driving that strategy? So far, the answer is no, not yet in majority. Again, nothing is 100%, right? And one of the reason I would say is many a times the ownership and responsibility is given when you already demonstrate that you have taken it, right? Informally, and then the formal thing follows. So as a GCC leaders, we need to start raising hand and creating strategy and running these strategies with the global counterparts and see, I mean, what's missing in this kind of a thing. And slowly, I mean, you have a more permanent seat at the table where the parts of the finance strategy, you can drive it, you can develop it, you can continue to do it. So many a times we feel that we are the execution arm, which we are, very important one. But we need to tell ourselves that we are also the strategic partners and start participating before anybody would ask you or allow you. So that would be my this thing. And capability wise, as Atul said in the previous question, I don't think there is any challenge on the capability side. Location, yeah, is an important this thing. And even if you see people, I have seen people, and I have spoken on this subject quite a lot, people moving from the US to London and London to US or Singapore to London, etc. right? Because there is a investor expectation as well, that where is your group CFO sitting? If it is a New York based or a London based bank, if a group CFO is sitting in India or in anywhere else for that matter, London based sitting in New York is also not acceptable, right? Sitting in Singapore is also not acceptable. So it's not about GCC versus others. It's about, there are certain nuances from an investor expectation perspective that you need to be at a particular location. This is just aligning with that. So from a strategy perspective also, I mean, it needs to be seen, it is done by the head office, but how much role do we play is up to us. Atul?
Got it.
No, I'm aligned with what you said, Nathan. I was thinking on the same lines.
Great. Okay, so before we close, let's do a quick lightning round, right? In just one sentence from each one of you, what is that one capability every finance professional in a GCC should build to stay relevant in the next decade? We'll start with Atul.
If I have to just name one, make sure that you're adopting technology in the right way, which is relevant for your function and the organization both.
Yatin?
So if I have to add the second, I would say tell yourself that you can work on strategic finance. Don't wait for anybody to tell you that.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much. So, guys, if there is one theme that's clearly emerging from this discussion, right, it's finance GCC is no longer just efficiency centers. They are evolving into global finance capability hubs and strategic partners to the enterprises, right? So the next phase of our journey will likely be shaped by AI, advanced analytics, and global finance leadership emerging directly from the GCCs, right? Thank you, Atul and Nitin, for sharing such valuable insights. And thank you to the audience for being part of this discussion. Enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the third panel for today's conversation. It was great to hear from Finance GCCs, how it is evolving, and it was really great to hear from Atul as well as from Nitin. With that, I think we spoke a lot about technology and we all spoke a lot about the capability. So we would like now to deep dive into the very important, pertinent topic about the capability gap in GCCs. And to take our conversation deep into it, we would like to invite our panelists, first starting with Vinod Shah, who is a technology leader and heads the Zendesk GCC. Welcome, Vinod.
Thank you, Ritu.
So I think Vinod brings with him a huge experience from engineering sector, where he has built large technology teams across and has helped GCCs not only to set up operations, but also to evolve and mature to the next levels. And with that, I think when we talk about capability, we can't afford to miss the HR. So our next panelist is Ruchi Dubey, who is heading the Metro GCC as a director of people. Welcome, Ruchi.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ruchi and Vinod, to be here. And without much ado, I just want to talk, get deeper into this conversation about the capability gap. When GCCs come to India, they come with a lot of excitement because they hear. I'm going back to my first panelist, Sandeep, when he said there are 1.8 million people who are passing out year on year, and we have people here. But suddenly, when rubber meets the road and they have to really hire the people, they start realizing that there's a gap. So there are two components. There is talent. Of course, talent is there. But do we have the right talent as per the skills and the demand in future? Not sure about it. And of course, there are many success stories which people talk about, but there are many hardships and there are many failure stories as well. So we want to understand from both of you, and I will start with you, Ruchi, is basically when you are here in India and you are setting up this GCC and you're facing this roadblock, can I scale up with X number of people in the X duration of the time? You really start, getting the cold feet. So then, organizations have two options: either you buy or you build the internal capabilities, or you go and hire. So, from your perspective, Ruchi, as an HR leader, what do you think that what is the best strategy? And if you could share any examples of success or failure from both the perspectives, buy and build.
Thank you, Ritu, and a question which is very close to my heart. Between Nitin, Sandeep, and Atul, to some extent, a lot of these points were discussed. But let me address it from a HR perspective, right? For years, if you look at the way GCCs have worked and scaled up, it's been the same axis, right? It's about put in more people, bring in more scale, and then talk about efficiencies. Now the model is shifting. We are moving towards intelligence-led operations. We are talking about where the AI is going to change the way we think. So if you look, early stage GCCs will typically start with a buy approach. Why is that? Because there is certain amount of skill and ability that is needed, right? You need to plug in those capabilities for your stakeholders sitting in other countries to build that confidence in you of having the cost. Let's look at the new age skills, right? You look at analytics, you look at data science, you look at cybersecurity. No company can start without having that. However, as you sustain up that curve, right? As you sustain up that curve, you start pivoting to a build model. You will gradually start thinking of how do I upscale? How do I build learning models? How do I build my internal capability? Because if I'm only relying on external hires, not only will my cost shoot through the roof, there is at some point the cultural misalignment will happen, right? So you said a good example, right? Let's look at someone, one of the GCCs I know, they were looking at data scientists at some point, right? About 2 years ago. And what they did was they started building, buying the data scientists from the market. And Indian market, of course, we have a lot of talent which is available, but that also comes at a certain cost. So when they started building, they did good frameworks. They brought in what needed to be done from the American partner parent company. They brought in the credibility. They brought the frameworks, but then they realized that it is becoming more expensive for them to have that layer constantly being replenished or added to. After say about 2.5 years, it was becoming a little unsustainable. So they launched their own internal academy. They hired from fresh engineers from colleges. They started looking at people from, say, analytics domain in the MBAs from some of our good institutes. And they launched an internal academy where they started training these people and upskilling them. Within the next year and a half, this brought them to a point where they were not just cost effective, but they were also bringing in a outside in perspective as well as inside out. There was a failure also that I saw in another organization, and this was a very interesting study, right? We in my previous world, I was working with an organization where the biggest challenge was that they were not able to sustain the talent, right? Scalability was there, they were able to hire people, but what happened is this talent was disconnected from the parent organization because they were bringing in a knowledge which was coming from outside. There was no inside out perspective. After a bit of the long-term vision was missing for them. So what happened was, then they said, okay, I bring in this talent from outside, and then I look at my high pot analytics oriented people inside, combine the two, right? And that hybrid approach for them actually made that team successful. And as per my last check-in, they were doing really well. So it's not really a binary choice, right? It is not whether I build or I buy. I buy at my initial phase, right? When I am seeding talent, then I start building, then I add fresh blood from the market, and then I upskill that again. And that would be my a build versus buy response.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruchi. I think it makes a lot of sense because we have to really look at, I would say, a multi-pronged approach where we build, we buy, but eventually we don't keep buying. We have to build internally so that we are able to sustain and also strengthen our foundation.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the next question, Vinod. If we look at, she spoke about the capabilities. There are capabilities which you have to buy, and eventually you have to build the capabilities inside. Even if it has been I would say, the wave 4 of GCCs in India, where we have moved from cost or outpost to really leadership and product engineering roles here in India. But still, if we look at majority, there is something which is a mold for the roles, which is a core design, which is the concept, which is a thought process, which generally sits outside India. And then you have the periphery, even a very closer periphery, which sits in India. So even though we have evolved a lot, but I would say we are still far away from having that core here in India. Interestingly, those core are Indians, but not sitting in India many times. But that is what is the reality. Now, as we are moving forward, and this is becoming imminent, that we have to take the leadership role specifically in the tech. What are your thoughts on this gap in the leadership capability? And what do you think we can do to really let the nucleus be here from a tech perspective, and we can build the periphery and not restrain ourselves only to the periphery?
Great question, Ritu. But before I start, first of all, with tomorrow being Women's Day, I wanted to acknowledge and thank you all the women for the incredible diversity of thought and drive they bring to our ecosystem every day. So I just wanted to make sure I plug that in. And, to your question, I think as Mr. Sandeep said it earlier, right? It's not that it's not happening. The process has already started. But I think what we need to pivot towards is, right, we need to get away from the comfort of managing down to the skill of influencing across, right? Many leaders in India, and I would say, it was true a few years back, and it's still there. We're excellent at delivery, but we struggle when it comes to high stakes influence, right? We need to basically double down in our ability to shape the company's strategic vision and outcomes and not just respond to it. I think there's a mental shift model out there. The second thing, at least in technology, right? Gone will be the days where it's all about headcounts or cost arbitrage, right? With the evolving ecosystem of technology, it will all be about outcome-based governance, right? And what that means is you will need to look at what is the impact per engineer, we need to have the mindset and comfort zone of talking about the P&L impact and not just sprint velocity in general, right? How fast we can deliver and execute. I think the other part that I feel and very close to my heart, and it's just natural, that we have been in this ecosystem where most of the people will say, yes, we can do it. They raise their hands and they say, yes, we can do it. But besides that, what we need to say is, yes, we can do it, but this is how we should do it. I think that cultural fluidity is very, very important, because if I look from a global HQ leaders, they're really looking at not somebody could just do it if they are talking about leaders, but really, getting a strategic pushback, based on the local innovation that we are having and thinking it differently, because that's how we are going to move things ahead from where they are. So that's how I would think about it.
Thank you so much, Vinod. And I think thanks for the compliment as well. You are flanked by two women in the center. So you are the lucky one. I think this really brings me to the next question, Ruchi, because when we talk about the talent, and, as he rightly said, it's not about saying that it is possible, but it's also saying that how can we do it? Shifting that ownership, because once you shift the ownership, the next leg follows, which is the capability, and that generally happens. Now, when GCCs are going to hire the talent, one of the gaps they always find generally is are these people really able to create that, I would say, capability in dealing with the global headquarters? Are they able to create that outcome based, I would say, solutions to the problems? And sometimes it boils down even to as basic as that they have to work with multicultural people. How much cultural sensitivity they have to the other regions? Are they able to even get the language and make the outcomes? And honestly speaking, last 2 years, I have seen great tech talent getting rejected in GCCs only because they doesn't have that flair of ability to work with the global counterparts. Maybe it is culture, maybe it is language, maybe it is whatever. So now that is a bottleneck which most of these organizations face. From your understanding, what should GCCs do in order to ensure that the talent which they are hiring do have these emerging capabilities, even may not be 100%? And what should professionals do to build these capabilities in themselves? Because if I'm looking for building a career in GCC and I'm super sound technologically, but it's not only about technology, because I'm working in this multifaceted world. I have to deal with the global counterparts. I have to really show that I have that flair to work with them. So what should the professionals be doing so that they are able to move up the curve and build those their career in that direction?
Great question, Ritu. Like you rightly said, let me just rephrase what you said. Right, one of the the biggest mistakes the organizations have done in the past and sometimes continue to do is we hire as HR, as hiring managers. What we hire is like traditional back office roles, right? But what we forget, and what most of the GCCs and GCSCs are building today, is a talent which is not just technically sound, but also requires global exposure, what we call the cross-cultural agility. And trust me, nobody in India knows cross-cultural agility better than Indians. But ability to influence outcomes across geographies, right? These are things that are required in any talent. So this is what I would say the soft skills of today. It's not just about communication, behavior, presence, presentation ability. It's about stakeholder management, about ability, about collaboration. So for me, it is very critical that one, as organizations, we start hiring for something we call the business partnering skill. At Metro, we call it the business partnering ability, right? Your ability to understand and manage with stakeholders. For people who are coming from outside or who are looking for the next shift, what they need to build and understand first is something which of course comes with an experience. If you're still looking at a mid and senior layers, is an ability to, you develop an ability to work across cultures, but business partnering, the thought of how do I understand what they are looking for. I am not just skills. Do I bring problem solving ability to the table? If I don't, then how do I start looking at a question not as a problem but as a solution, right? I understand what my skills bring to the table, right? So this is what I would say is the skill of the future. You have to start thinking of business outcomes versus just pure technical skills. So even I may be an AI or analytics or automation or a finance. These are the skills that we are looking at. But what matters for me as an individual is how do I present my technical skills as a business solution to the stakeholder. How do I bring business partnering to the table, and how am I more conscious about what do I bring for the upskilling of the next? So that would be what I think the three skills, and that is what the companies have also started looking for.
Great. I think Ruchi, really great insights because I can completely relate to it when you spoke about problem solving. If we have to stay relevant today, whatever great technically we are, if we are not able to solve the problem, if we are not able to do the business partnership and drive the outcomes, the rest would really come, I would say, in the bottom up skills for us. Amazing insights. And from a career perspective, to all our listeners who are listening to us, I think what Ruchi spoke about, business partnership, outcome based, as well as problem solving, we have to have these abilities to build our careers, and they become even more relevant in the GCC space. And that brings me to the next question to you, Vinod. I think, from our earlier two panelists, we heard a lot about capabilities, we heard a lot about finance as a sector and all that. But I think one thing which we haven't spoken at all till now is that when GCCs are shifting and it's becoming, I would say, an engine for economic growth for the country and everything, there is a titanic shift happening in the technology itself. So what is happening with the new tech and AI coming in, roles are getting disrupted. So scale is getting replaced by value. So, and if you see the pace of this change, it is much, much, I would say, faster in the past than the past. Now, what is happening in this whole, I would say, shift is that there are new skills which have to be built and which have to be developed and which have to be delivered for the GCCs and for us also as a country. Because if we have to really keep the people employable, they have to have those skills. Now, from your perspective, what are the skills which you see are future focused skills? Of course, as a layman and not a techie and not an engineering leader, I would say AI, which has become the word after I, you, and me in today's world. But moving more deeply into it, I just sharing my experience. When we are hiring people, we are seeing there is so much of challenge to hire. I would say data engineers, data scientists, AI ML developers, AI ML engineers. So from your perspective, what are those future skills?
Got it. A great question. And by the way, Ruchi said it really well on the capabilities gap. So I'll just build upon that, right? The 2 points that I want to make sure that people know about this. We don't have a talent shortage. It's all about maturity mismatch, right? Because as you said, with the technological innovation, things are moving fast. I mean, we had these technological innovations for the past, multiple decades. The big difference is the pace. So what's happening is expectations are outpacing the traditional skills we bought. In my mind, in the next 5 years, technical will be a commodity. right? The judgment will be the premium. So what we really need to, what I meant by that is what Ruchi said. It's all about problem solving, right? We keep thinking it's all about product thinking. We have to move from a project to product, right? And what this is how do we frame the problem, right? Is going to be very, very important, because you will need to tell people this is what AI will not do for you, is frame the problem or tell you, hey, what you need. So you have to be good at asking the right questions. If you look back, this is the most common sense thing that, even before this advent of AI, we needed to do. But the difference is this is now becoming extra important than ever before, because AI will only do what you tell it to do, and it will give you the right outcome if you actually phrase it well. Of course, they're all maturing in its own technological advancements, but this skill will not go. The system thinking is going to be very critical. Product thinking is going to be very critical. So that's one skill that I would definitely say. Now, I don't know if anybody heard Mr. Salil Parekh. I think who's an Infosys CEO, he said this very nicely. We are all worried about where will humans go with AI advent and not. But I think we are all saying in this panel, and you heard it across, the future is human plus agent model, right? It's not about just to learn to use AI. It's going to be important how to learn to manage a digital colleague. Use them as your digital brainstorming person next to you to kind of upskill yourself to do things differently that you were doing manually before. So I think it's more going to be, hey, just don't think about using the AI, but how do you apply the AI in everything you do, and thinking about the product. The last important thing, at least in my mind, is, I think if you're talking, we talked about the leadership question and things like those. The ability to understand the domain is going to be very, very critical. I think we have the skill. I will repeat it again. We have the skill. It's the confidence level besides the soft skill. Everybody wants to know how you can do things differently, not the way it used to be, right? So people are looking at, do you understand the why behind the strategy and what you're bringing to the table? So, just recalibrating your mind towards that is going to be important. I do want to add one more statement, at least in the software engineering space, right? One of the big things is what is overestimated today. As I said, technical will be a commodity. Example, pure coding will become irrelevant, in our industry in the next few days, right? AI is already generating half of the code for you. It's not going to matter that you're a syntax expert, because that's a dying value prop. Similarly, right, if you just need to have humans monitor a predefined process, that's a total risk of displacement. So what's going to come in is, how do you basically partner with your digital colleague, which is your AI agent, understand the why, and how do you basically multiply yourself using that is going to be the most important. It all boils down to how you think about the problem, how you solve about the problem. It's not about the technical skills that were important, just like coding.
Great. I think great insights. Thank you so much, Vinod. And I could see one HR leader and one technology leader, and I could see them merging with each other in terms of the capabilities, the way you spoke about systems thinking, product, problem solving, and actually what you spoke about, the future is going to be humans plus agents. And we have to be mentally ready for that. And we have to build our capabilities. And thinking from a product perspective, having a systems thinking. So thank you so much. Since we are, kind of crossing the time, but I still want you to give one word, a mantra, to our audience, which they should, eat, drink, and breathe as they are building their careers, and maybe they are seeing GCC as an opportunity for them to build a career. One word from you, Vinod, and one word from you, Ruchi, before we close.
One word from me is adaptability. It's super important.
Perfect. Thank you. Ruchi, what about you?
I would like to have more than one word in. I would say business acumen.
It's Women's Day tomorrow, so I give you the liberty of more than one word.
Thank you. But I would say business, women always like to have the last word in. So business acumen, change agility, and ability to translate your skills into impact. I think that sums up pretty much what Vinod and I've been speaking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great points. Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here with both of you, and I'm sure audience also gained as well.
Thank you.
Vandana, can you hear me? Over to you now.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining in. It's been an amazing session so far. And we have the last part, but we always save the best for last. My name is Vandana Saxena-Poria. We've got a fantastic panel for you today. So just to set the context very briefly, GCCs have created extraordinary careers over the last 10 to 15, possibly 20 years. Deep expertise, global exposure, opportunity to work at scale. But many GCCs, as we've heard, are moving up the value chain into product ownership, decision-making, innovation, which means that careers may start to look less like ladders and more like jungle gyms. So today we want to explore what that shift means really for professionals thinking about this phase of their careers. So let me just quickly introduce our panel. We have Tarun Arora from Protivity. He's MD for Accounting Advisory Services. He advises organizations on complex financial reporting, governance, and finance transformation. Welcome, Tarun. We also have Srinivas Sampath from Upland Software. Hi. Srinivas Sampath from Upland Software. He's VP R&D and India site leader, where he leads engineering product development from India for the global software company. Welcome, Srini.
Thanks, Vandana.
We also have Jayesh Prajapati, who is the head of the Pune TLB, the global energy technology company, formerly known as Schlumberger. He leads engineering and technology teams. And finally, we have Samir Sheikh, who's head of Global Capability Center for XPO in India, where he leads the organization's global operations and capability development. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to go straight into this. And it's been useful. Roshan talked earlier about how technology and strategic finance are going to be important. Vinod Shah mentioned mental shifts and cultural sensitivity. There's been a lot more things that have been discussed, but I'd like to start with Srini. If somebody spent, because this is about career pivots, if somebody has spent 10 years in a GCC doing the same function, are they already at risk? Srini, what would you say?
Yeah, first off, thanks, Vandana. Great to be on this panel. And having listened to the previous three panels, I think it's been an amazing, I should say, set of points that were discussed in and around this topic. So specifically, I think to your question, if someone has spent 10 years in a GCC doing the same function, does that put them out of risk? The way I see it is, time is not the risk, right? It's essentially the stagnation of skills that will be the risk, right? And I think we saw this being reiterated multiple times in the previous panel as well. So what I see is if someone has spent 10 years in a GCC doing the exact same role without evolving their skills, then yes, they would absolutely be at risk. Because we have seen, in terms of how GCCs are evolving, the move is rapidly happening from execution-oriented work to higher value work, right? We talked about product ownership, platform engineering, AI-enabled operations, and so on, right? We also heard in the previous sessions about how GCCs are, evolving. So this is a big reality, right? So a person, if they have to be relevant within a GCC for a long time, they absolutely have to continuously evolve, right? And that happens by adopting automation, learning data tools, understanding the business context, and even taking on global responsibilities, right? That's when we really become valuable. In fact, I'm remembered about a point that Sandeep talked about in the earlier panel about how this is very, very important. So the question is, not how long have you been in a GCC, but how have you reinvented yourself?
Okay, Srini, thank you for that. Samir, do you see it the same way? Is it not about how long you've been in that position, but how you're reinventing yourself, or do you think something different?
I think just to add more to what Srini said, I think like the real value any team member can bring into a GCC is not just about like how they are evolving or right skilling or upskilling themselves, but also about like how they are growing with the maturity model of the GCC. I think let's take for example a GCC that is into still into an execution phase, who are just basically doing the tick in the box kind of activities, executing a process. I think there probably it might not make much difference if you are in a functional silo doing the same thing over and over again, because your GCC itself has not evolved. But for a GCC that is evolving, in the process maturity model, where they are basically like kind of gone over from process execution to process ownership, like a leap jump, where they are strategic owners to the processes, to the technology, to the innovation. I think that is where the talent comes at a very, very high risk if they are not evolving. They not only need to upskill, I think they need to right skill, is the word that I would use. You may probably be an amazing developer when you are doing the process execution and maintenance of the software that you were developing from here. But when you have to innovate, I don't think you just need like an upskilling of your skill set. I think you need right skilling of the skill set, which might be like a shift from writing code to probably writing designs or mature enterprise application models. And I think that is one thing that I certainly see that would bring into the risk. The other aspect that I really feel is important is hyper specialization into the functional domains. I think most of the people get into the comfort zone because they know that this is exactly what I know. I am the expert out here, and they stick to it. That hyper specialization actually puts you at a risk, and I think getting off that comfort zone is very, very important. I was talking to a colleague of mine very recently who said that I am a deep line expert on a certain tech, and I think like now I know everything about it, and now I know the people, now I know who to deal with. And I think the difficult conversation when we were having that, I asked him a question saying, what this technology goes away from the market today, what would you do? And he had no answer. And I think that is probably what all of us will have to be aware of, that staying the longevity is not a problem. I think like Shini rightly said, the stagnation of that talent, knowledge, skill is basically going to put you at a risk.
Thank you, Samir. That's brilliant, because you beautifully put me into the next question as well. So, I mean, you talked about deep specialism, and Dharan, I want to come over to you, Lee, in the area that you are a deep specialist in may change. So is the future about being a deep specialist, or is it more about cross-functional generalists? Dharan, what would you say?
Great, and thanks again for inviting me here. So I hope I'm audible to everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I think this kind of my favorite, because this allows me to tell my journey, and I would say I'm somewhere in the middle. See, I started my career in the statutory audits, eventually moved into consulting, accounting consulting, and again, helping a lot of GCCs as part of consulting also. So when you start your career, I guess that's where the role specialization becomes very important. Okay. And that is where you earn the trust of the organization. Let's say in our domain, we start with vouching, then eventually owning up certain balances, then owning up financial statements of a client, then probably clients itself, and then certain market comes. So yes, specialization to me as part of, let's say, handling large team is very important. So I would definitely have specialists in my team because that is where the real trust lies. But to me, as you grow in your career, be it consulting, GCC, or any industry for that matter, definitely you ask questions, and that is where you understand how your work is related to other cross functions and how it's impacting the business decisions. Okay. So as you grow in your career, it's important to ask right questions, as of course a fellow panelist also said. It's important to understand the context behind that, and that is where you kind of actively participate into the business decisions. And I think one point I like to make, the journey from specialist, when you start mastering your role, gaining the trust of your seniors, eventually broadening your horizon, and then becoming a journalist, it's very important that you understand it's all about now people management. Journalists, let's say in my team, or let's say the people I see journalists, they are generally those people who are very good with people. Because a lot of times it's not just problem, it's a problem is viewed differently by different people. And people who are able to understand that better is able to solve that problem better also. So I think that's how I would say it's a journey. Somewhere you have to understand that we start with one role. That's where specialization is very important, especially with the AI and tech. So yes, some of these will become more and more easy for us, but the larger part, and then that's where the GCC career, any career becomes more rewarding when you become actually journalist and you start understanding the business part of everything you do.
Okay, great. Dharan, thank you so much for that. Jayesh, I want to bring you in here. So what Dharan's saying is that at the start of your journey, you do need to go deep. But then as you mature and as your GCC matures, perhaps you need to build in some cross-functional generalist skills as well. What would you say? Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I hope I'm audible, right? First of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to share the stage with such experts, right? So I completely see the point. And again, that is something which we also observe. To start with, in the career, I mean, obviously you have to know certain space in depth, right? But then having said that, what happens is the era which we are in right now, it's evolving so fast that when we talk about a particular industry, right, be it technology, be it medical, right, be it finance, right, or be it energy, anything. We have seen that with AI's rapid growth, the whole depth of the knowledge is slowly getting captured into the specialized domain models, right? So we talked about earlier large language models, which is how it started, but they are very, focused on the generic knowledge, right? But then now we are seeing that there's an emergence of very deep models which are being emerged for a particular sector, right? So with that trend, I think it's very important to take a step back and see that, yeah, I mean, you do have expertise in certain skills, right? But then are we really evolving, and are we getting cross-functional knowledge also, right? Which means the breadth part we just talked about. So there has to be a balance between the depth and the breadth, right? So for example, earlier, if you look at it, when we used to take interviews and when we used to select candidates, we used to always look at the thing, look at the attribute that the skill that whether they can answer the questions, right? Now, whether they have the knowledge, right? So now slowly the trend is going to go to a place where it's not important to have the answers. It's important to have a skill of asking the questions. Is the candidate able to ask the right question? Right? Because there will be a lot of tools available who can get the answers for the candidate, but then does he know how to utilize that tool at his disposal, right? So that's going to be one skill. So when I say about depth, I think the technical depth will help, the domain knowledge depth will help, and slowly the shift is going to be more towards the domain knowledge, right? The business acumen, right? And slowly away from little bit the in-depth technical skills, because all the tools, the languages and everything is slowly going to be I'll not say overshadowed, but slowly going to be built as intelligence in the whole AI models which are emerging. Right? Another thing which I feel as part of the skill is is about analytical thinking, right? Which is also going to be an important skill, irrespective of how deep you go into a particular sector. Shifting from IQ to EQ, right? That's going to be a big shift, right? Because earlier we used to focus a lot on IQ. Now with this whole change which is happening, I think it's about the EQ, the empathy question, right? That is something which is going to be a very big differentiator, right? So, so a short answer is, yeah, I think the depth is important, but then without losing the focus on the breadth, right? Because sometimes there was a great discussion earlier about whether it is do you get stagnant after working in one role for a long time, right? And offline, I had discussions with some of the colleagues also, and everywhere people come and say, okay, I am due for promotion because I have been doing this job for, let's say, 10 years, right? And then my comment is, yeah, but then you don't have 10 years experience. You have 2 years experience, multiply 5 times, right? So it's very important to understand the breadth part of it, right? The veracity part of it, the diversity part of it, right? So just to kind of punch in on the key highlights, right? Business knowledge, domain knowledge, humanitarian skills, moving to EQ, creative thinking, and being curious, right? One of the most important skill everybody has to learn, irrespective of what industry or sector they are in, is learn how to learn, right? I mean, that is going to be a differentiator.
Yeah. Actually, Jayesh, it's really timely that you say that as well, because so in the previous session as well, Ruchi talked about cultural sensitivity, and you need a lot of EQ for that. But I'm reminded of Anand Deshpande from Persistent Systems, and he and I are writing a book together. And one of the key things that he says about what skills do you need to learn in each decade to be more successful in the next is you have to learn how to learn, and you have to be curious. So this is so it's great that you bring that up. He also talks about, what we've talked about is a T model where we go deep and then we have this breadth on top. He actually says it's a pie model, which means that you need to go deep in 2 areas, not just in one. So I mean, more or less, I'm hearing from all of you that you need to go deeper in many areas, not just one specific area. And Jayesh, I want to stick with you for a minute. Very quick answers. We've got, I think, about another 10 minutes to go. Okay. I just want to ask you, you talk experience, which roles are actually growing because of AI?
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll keep it short, right, and very crisp. I think the answer changes based on who you ask, but then if you look at the overall trend and also the reports and forums and where this whole industry is going, right, especially with the influence of AI, a couple of roles which are going to go obsolete, right, are the ones which are very dependent on manual, repetitive tasks. Right. So if you apply that guideline to any industry, any sector, which you can pretty much see that is something can be taken over by the AI going forward, right? If it's not already done. To be again more specific, for example, postal services, clerks, bank clerks, legal secretaries, medical diagnosis also at one point of time, right? I think we're not there yet, but then eventually we'll be there. Material recording, stock keeping. So a lot of those tasks.
What do you think is going to grow?
Yeah, what is going to grow is certain areas like the big data. Right, the big data specialist.
Focus on what you think is going to grow.
Yeah. So what is going to grow is a big data specialist, fintech engineers, security management, space, environment and renewable energy engineers. Right. So that are the spaces where it's going to go. Anywhere which requires a domain acumen and a critical thinking, analytical thinking, those skills will help to kind of grow those kind of roles. So I think in terms of skill sets and in terms of roles, anywhere which is to do with AI, data, security, networking, and those are the roles which I can clearly see going. Yeah.
Thank you, and sorry for interrupting you, Srini. I just want to get some perspectives. Would you agree? Would you say those, or would you add anything else? Very quickly, if I can get you to.
Sure, Vandana. I think my point of view is AI will definitely play a role or a deep role in the job space. But I think it will reshape how many of the roles do their work, right? I think this is an area or this is an era we have to consider as coexistence and not replacement all the time, right? So of late, you see a lot of news around AI, being held responsible for layoffs, right? And there's a term in the industry for this now called AI washing. right? Which is you're basically blaming a technology when the underlying problem could be something else. So my advice to all the people listening in is always read between the lines and don't always assume that it's AI that's caused the problem. The reality is we still need humans in the loop. And I think multiple panels have kind of reiterated that. But what I think is this human who's now in the loop needs to have additional skills, right? And that's how your job is getting reshaped. So the way I like to think about this is think of your role as a composition of tasks that you need to do. What you have to do is unpack those tasks and look at what AI can or cannot automate. Forget those. Those are gone, right? And what you are left with is a set of areas that you need to now deep dive and build that skill on more deeply, right? So just to give you a quick example, if you're a developer, for example, one aspect of your role is writing code, and the second is having a deep understanding of fundamentals of the technology or data structures or whatnot, right? Now, writing code is gone, right? AI does a fantastic job. But what AI gives is not always optimal. So that's where your skill of having deep fundamentals and understanding how systems work will really come into picture. I think in the previous panel, Vinod talked about the systems thinking, right? You need to have that. So that is something that is not going to go away. So my take is AI is not replacing jobs, it's probably reshaping them, right? And as humans, I think we need to really think about what aspects are getting reshaped and double click on them.
Great. Okay. Samir, very quickly, 30 seconds. What's your perspective on this?
I'm going to rephrase what both Srini and Jay said. I'm going to say that any role that involves judgment, any role that involve design solution architects, AI ML architects, roles that involve governance, GRC mainly, AI needs a lot of guardrails and governance, and roles that require a lot of interpretation are the roles that are going to grow. So anything else that would probably require us to upskill or probably, right skill. And the last thing for AI leaders, adoption is the skill that they need to learn. They need to have adaptability, as Vinod was saying earlier. If AI leaders have to grow, I think that is the skill they need, and that's how those are the roles that are going to grow.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, in the last couple of minutes, literally 30 seconds each, I'm interested in knowing what is one career mistake that you see GCC professionals making today that they should avoid. So Tarun, can I start with you?
Sure. Again, my reflection will be basis my discussion with a lot of finance leader, business finance, reporting, controllership. So I think I won't call it a mistake, but I think the problem is they work in, of course, silos. They have a lot of capability. I was talking to a friend in a large GCC. So he's done, let's say, a good amount of work on IFRS, US GAAP. He knows SOX, he knows internal controls. He's led transformation projects. But he's still very unsure how it's being perceived by the leaders. Probably that's how the GCCs are. Headquarters people have more visibility, GCCs have less. So I think it's important. I think that's what my guidance to him. It's always important that we give our perspective in everything we do. Okay, in GCC, I think that's my message. Even if, let's say, you're working on a report or something, it's always good to give a perspective on your work product. If whosoever you're interacting with in your teams, that helps you in a way for people to understand your work. So I think that will be my message. Always add your perspective, whatever you do in GCC.
Brilliant. So add your perspective. Speak up. That's great. Jayesh, yes. What would you say is the one career mistake?
Yeah, so I'm going to go very controversial, right? Because when we talk about global capability center GCC, I think one of the career mistake is that we are focusing on the capability part of GCC, right? Because I think if you want to go to GIC, right, which is Global Innovation Center, right, the focus has to slowly move away from capability to innovation. It will take time, right? Capability I'm talking about is the support functions. Eventually, we'll reach a stage where support should not need support, right? And then eventually the focus has to get into the innovation part, right? Where the most of the time is spent into product mindset, growth mindset, strategic thinking, business alignment, leading by influence, innovation, asking why rather than focusing on what, right? To go there, I think one of the career mistake, which, and rightly so, because we are in the initial stages, but eventually we will be very aware of it, that we don't get sucked into the deep rabbit hole there, that let's not focus too much on the supports and operational capability, but start slowly moving the needle towards innovation, because eventually I think the support should not need support down the line.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Brilliantly said, Jayesh. Okay, Srini, over to you.
Sure. I mean, this is just a different take on what Jayesh just mentioned. The mistake that people should avoid is not just focusing on the task or technology that they're working on, but start understanding the larger business context. And more importantly, understanding how their work impacts the customer, impacts the business outcome. Right? A lot of people don't spend time understanding it. And today there are multiple avenues and ways for you to get that knowledge. In fact, AI can be a great companion for you to get that knowledge. So don't just focus on, I'm here to deliver tasks, but focus on, I want to understand and try to influence the business outcome.
Great. Thank you. And finally, over to Samir.
I think, like I very much align with what Srini was saying. And, I think most of the biggest mistake that most of the GCC professionals make is they try to build their careers around the processes, the technology that, GCCs are involved in. And I think that is where if they try and focus on the business outcome, if they try and understand the cross-domain function, cross-domain impact they can make, I think that is probably the right thing to do. I feel the business impact is like people who understand the business impact and how they can influence the business will be indispensable. So I certainly feel that is one thing. The other thing that I feel is like, building relationships. I think that's one skill that GCCs do not really leverage very well. If GCC professionals or if people out here can build great relationships with global stakeholders, I think that is going to take them far ahead as well.
Brilliant. Samir, thank you so much. To all of you, thank you. Seen them throughout the whole session today, but really going from silos into systems thinking, as Vinod brought up and our panels brought up as well. Going to systems thinking, then thinking about how do I collaborate better? How do I partner better? How do I increase that EQ? How do I show judgment? How do I speak up? How do I innovate? And below all of that, how am I more curious and not just accepting the status quo? So brilliant. Thank you all so much for your contributions. I think we got through a lot in the 25 minutes we had. Appreciate it all. And Shami, back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
I could not expect anything more than this. It was power-packed session. We had people connected all over the internet, on LinkedIn. I could see comments coming from YouTube. I could see, at least in parallel, there are a lot of people who are connected since beginning. More than 150 comments so far. All really good. So good show. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I think this is just the beginning. We wanted to just test it, try to add some value, small value to the ecosystem without spending too much effort or getting into too much of hypes. But we'll keep continuing these kind of sessions. That's my commitment. We'll have it probably every fortnight, once or twice a month. Now more dedicated to certain topics, not really getting into such a large format where 90 minutes or 2 hours we do it. It's too long for virtual, I realized. But certainly we'll have it continued. We'll have our community helping wherever we can in terms of solving these problems related to talent, related to skills, connecting each other wherever we can help as a community. I mean, that's the whole goal here. But thank you so much, all the viewers, everybody here in the panel, everybody here in the room. There are a lot of people in the green room now. I'm not able to add everyone here on the stage, but whoever I can add here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shamir, for the
Thanks,
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Shamir.
great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Cool.